Alright guys, what's going on and welcome back to Overunder. Today I'm going to be showing you some gameplay that I have on Lucio, and this is one of the first games that I've played since calibrating this new account. So, if you're unaware, I've been playing Lucio probably the majority of the time on this new account, and the reason being is that I want to learn how to best approach these games that are a lot lower than the average MMR that I'm used to be playing on. Like, my objective, of course, is to gain MMR on this account, but I want to do it in such a way that allows me to learn more about the different skill brackets and give me a better idea on how to, teach others to approach getting out of a similar situation. And I think, in general, Lucio is a hero that is going to serve a fairly similar purpose, no matter the skill bracket that you're in. Heroes like McCree or Zaya feel like if your individual skill on those heroes is above average, of course, you will perform at a much, more consistently higher level than your competitors. But Lucio's one of the heroes that doesn't necessarily swing the game completely in your favor. The hero, of course, can be quite strong, but he just doesn't realistically kill too much on his own. So I want to talk about a few things that you can do to help maximize your chances of winning a game, despite not being on the solo carry that you might be used to be pursuing, as I said, the McCree, the Zayas, the Genjis and stuff. And I think the main way that you'll want to do that is via Lucio's speed boost. And of course, speed boost is probably his best ability in his whole entire kit. And the reason I say that, obviously you're probably thinking, well, his ultimate's pretty fucking good, isn't it? 600 health barrier. That's pretty damn nice. But the ultimate is, of course, extremely good. But the reason why I consider his speed boost to be stronger is because you simply have it more. You have access to it much more frequently. So you have the ability to take advantage of its strengths much more often than the ultimate, of course. But anyway, the ultimate is still very strong. So the best way I think you can realistically use Lucio's speed boost, and of course, there is unlimited situations that I could describe a speed boost for being a good idea. But I want to, in this video in particular, break it down to two specific environments that I consider the best times to use the speed boost, at least the amping up portion of the boost. The first of which is maximizing the damage potential of your team. And as we take the first round here, I want to talk about and, take notes on how I approach round 2 here to take the first fight. So speed boosting out of the gate, a lot of the times, especially on control point or capture the king of the hill, whatever you want to call it, you want to use the speed boost initially and then later on. So you look in the kill feed, you'll notice that my allied Reaper gets the opening pick onto the enemy Roadhog. So at that point, I see that the momentum is in our team's favor. It's now a 5 versus 6. And what you want to do with a speed boost is capitalize on these advantageous situations. Now, they're not always going to be that initial pickoff. There's a lot of different advantages that you can have. And I think just getting an initial pick is just the most obvious that you can really get. But things to look out for in terms of when do I speed boost to, put the advantage further into our favor is if the enemy team are extremely weak, if they've taken a lot of harassment damage and they're not healing it up fast enough, taking advantage of that situation is and also another great, use of the speed boost. And you'll find out throughout the games you play with Lucio that these advantages that you have that you want to capitalize on will always show themselves in very different in different ways, and finding out those different unique specific situations where pushing in is a viable thing to do. It all just comes with time and experience, but I do want to highlight some to help you kind of understand what I look for an advantageous situation. But I think the most obvious, of course, is those initial picks. So, of course, we've got to break it down a little bit more than that. And the second use that I consider Lucio's speed boost to be the strongest with is the opposite. So, of course, speed boosting to gain a further advantage in a fight is great and everything, but what if the fight isn't going your way? Let's say your team is the team who takes the first death, and you want to make sure that your allies are staying alive. It can be tempting to amp up your heal and keep everybody alive, and sometimes that's even the correct move to make. But if the enemy is starting to engage you because they notice that they have the advantage, you want to be looking to make sure that you minimize the effectiveness of their push. If the enemy is pushing up very aggressively into your team, speed boosting the rest of your team in the opposite direction, now this does require your team to recognize that they need to back off, but I think most people can recognize that. It's not always smart to move forward with a speed boost, but as long as you give them that utility of that extra movement speed, you've done your job, because there's only so much you can do to help a teammate realize that, whatever situation they're in, they need to make that judgment on their own. And if they don't make that judgment on their own, you can obviously use your voice and make sure that you let them know what's going on and it's no longer a safe place to be, and tell them to back off. And on this account in particular, I will not be using voice communication. This account is half dedicated to learning the lower ranks and the niches and things that I can do to improve other people's gameplay. And it's also a half so I can just take the game a little less seriously while still learning how to play at a very high level. And one way that I take the game very seriously is through the use of voice communication. I think Lucio, the hero in general, if you're going to be using him to the greatest of your own potential, you're going to need to use communication. And I think if you're going to be using the pre-made voice lines like your ultimate charge and, group up and stuff, that can do the job a lot of the times. But to get the most out of this hero, especially if you're a solo queue player, is to literally just tell your team what you're doing and give them a sense of direction. I think the Lucio player kind of has, he can really dictate how a team plays in terms of how they push, how they pull back, and how they approach fights and all the rest of that. So if you have the ability and you're not too embarrassed or whatever to talk on the microphone, definitely take advantage of using that, because it will be your strongest asset if you do use it correctly. You don't want to be flaming people and shit throughout the game. You might as well unplug your microphone if you're doing that. But if you're using speed boost for whatever reason it is, you want to explain that reason before you do it and whilst you're doing it. So if you find your team in a bad situation and you want to speed the boost them out, obviously just say on the mic, all right, speeding out, get out, get out, get out. It can be helpful to, repeat yourself like that and just get that point in at the time where it's relevant, instead of speed boosting, not saying anything, and then complaining in text chat, why didn't you get out? Using that voice to your advantage is definitely one of the strongest things you can do to improve your play with Lucio. But I think that'll pretty much wrap out the Lucio portion. I can't really think off the top of my head if there's too much more I want to add. I can go into greater detail into more specific situations in future videos, but I think for at least today, I'll leave it at that for now. But the second part of this video, I want to talk about the team mentality, or how a team, how the individuals within a team can affect the team play just through their mental state, and the momentum in which, can put them either into a very positive attitude or a very negative one, and how that affects. So, notice in this game, we went 2 rounds up fairly easily. And when you're in those situations, the enemy team is generally not going to be too happy. And I notice in these lower games especially, it's very frequent that I find players that are extremely pissed off if they're 2 rounds down in a best of 5. But in round 3, we ended up getting dominated despite taking the first point, and that made round 4 a little bit hard to approach. Once you lose that initial momentum from winning a game, you can definitely feel it's a very, maybe if you're very in tune with how the game is progressing, you definitely feel like the brakes have just been fucking shut right off, and you feel your team momentum just slow down, and it can be quite a daunting task to try and restore what you once had in terms of, you know, team morale and or actual in-game performance. But what ends up happening during the fourth round is that the Reaper ended up disconnecting, only to reconnect in round 5. But as you'll hear in a second, the damage, it was already done.
It's too late now. They've got too much confidence.
Like, hearing something like that in the 5th round of a game, like, you hear the guy laugh at the end, but he knows we're fucked. There's only so much you can do to try and retake the momentum, but at the end of the day, there's going to be variables that are out of your control, and the best thing you can realistically hope to achieve is to recognize when something is out of your control and make sure it isn't a factor that drags you down and makes you play worse due to you tilting or being mentally, you know, stirred up a little bit. And I think that's one thing I really want to work towards in terms of getting better at Overwatch is, despite playing on an account that might have lower MMR rating or whatever, I still want to improve like my mental attitude to how I approach games. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people should really be pursuing in terms of wanting to learn. I think it's probably one of the most important aspects of getting better at Overwatch. It doesn't really matter what level you're at. You need to actively pursuing the ability to, you know, have that positive mindset and the game winning mindset, as opposed to allowing momentum shifts, mental momentum shifts, to really dictate how you approach the game. But we'll see. In this final 5th round, the momentum was unfortunately in the enemy's favor quite heavily, despite my very best attempts of trying to regain the control point. But it's just one loss in a sea of many that you're going to have. And of course, you can't take those losses too seriously, otherwise it's really going to impact your approach to winning, because winning, instead of being this great thing, it becomes just like the thing that you expect. And if you don't get what you expect, it ends up making you feel really frustrated, and losing is just as important as winning in terms of getting better at this game. So as this game wraps up here, I think that is about all I have time for today. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I've recorded it so many times over that I don't even think I'm making any sense, but hopefully you got something out of it, whether it be some Lucio tips on how to speed boost more effectively, or how to better approach the game, or move forward into your own progression at getting better at Overwatch, whatever avenue you choose to take to improve your play. But as I said, not every game's winnable, and it's not always in your control to make it winnable. So don't stress too much. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you later in the next one.